Hello my fellow working class heroes, good day. I am Carlo and welcome to Carlo Excels. These are the objectives of this episode, so we're gonna talk about the kinds of references and then we're gonna compare relative references and absolute references, and then we're going to talk about using absolute references. So if you've been following our lesson so far, we've been making heavy use of certain functions, and then we've been talking about how references tend to adjust when we copy functions and then paste them. In fact, to demonstrate this again, say for example, if you look at the screen, I'm gonna create a basic sum function with a range. Say for example, I'm gonna write here the sum of this quiz and close parenthesis. So of course you will see here on the formula bar, sum B2 to K2. Then we press enter. Of course, we get the sum, which is 63. Then of course, when we copy that and paste that one cell down, you will notice of course that the references have adjusted based on where you copied it and where you pasted it. So in this case, because we copied it and then pasted it one cell down, you will notice that the cell references have also moved one cell down. That is how references work, and we've been alluding to that in all of our previous lessons. However, there are certain structures of certain Excel worksheets, or there may be certain cases wherein you don't seem to want Microsoft Excel to adjust your references whenever you copy and paste. Let me give you a few examples. Take for example a class record that looks like this. So let's say for example that you have 5 performance tasks or 5 projects in your class, and then that project, or rather for each project, you have an individual grade component and a group grade component. So say for example, these 10 points over here represent, for example, individual grade components. So you have, for example, Abby having 1 point as individual grades for each of those performance tasks. Then say for example, each and every one of those students have a group grade, and their total performance task grade is made up of the sum of their individual grade and their group grade. Now, say for example that their group grade is one solid number, one number that is to be distributed to all of them. So let's say for example, you want to add each student's individual grade here with the group grade that is to be given to all the students in this particular class. So let's do that with using the sum function or using a basic calculation. So say for example, we put here equals, and then cell B3 plus cell L2. So you have a total performance task grade for performance task 1. You have a total grade of 11. So that's 1 point for the individual grade and 10 points for the group grade. Now what about performance task 2? Say for example, in performance task 2, you want to use the exact same group grade. So what you want to do is, you want to take performance task 2, like so equal sign, performance task 2, this cell over here, plus the group grade as well. So I think by now you are noticing that this is a very lengthy calculation, because what you will have to do is you would have to keep on adding the performance task individual grade with the corresponding group grade over here at cell L2. Of course, some of you may be thinking, why can't we just copy and paste? So let's try that. So going back here at this cell, so this is cell B3. If you look at the formula bar, cell B3 plus cell L2. So if we copy that and paste that here, look at the result. The result is 2 points when we were expecting 2, which is Agua's PT1 grade, plus the group grade. But you will see that the score, the result is only 2. Why is that? Because please remember that not only is the reference B4 moving, the reference at L3, L2 is moving as well. So because you moved this one cell down, B4 or the cell in B3 also moved one cell down from B3 to B4, and the one in group grade, the group grade, also moved down from cell L2 to cell L3. At the same time, if we try copy pasting not downwards but to the right, so let's try that. Let's copy the formula here and then paste it over here. We are expecting a grade of 11 because that's supposed to be performance task number 2 individual grade 1 point plus the group grade 10 points. This is supposed to be 11, but the result is 1. And why is that? Because when you copy pasted one cell to the right, cell B3 has adjusted to cell C3. But you will notice that cell ML2 also adjusted one cell to the right. So that is why it says there, instead of L2, M2. If only it was possible for Microsoft Excel to not adjust cell L2 whenever we try to copy paste it, so that you will keep on referring to cell L2 when you copy paste this formula. In other words, we want B3 to move, the reference B3 to move as you copy paste, but you want cell L2 to remain the same. Take this next example over here. So here we have a class record that resembles what I would believe to be class records of those who are not closely following the Department of Education's grading system. So in this case, you have here in this class record quiz scores. So you have quiz number 1, quiz number 2, quiz number 3, quiz number 4, quiz number 5, and of course the average of all of those quizzes on this column. So what you want to do in this particular class record is this. You want to take the score of the student, in this case, the score of the student, and then you want to divide it by the number of items, which is up here. Score divided by number of items, let's say times 100, to get the percentage of that student for that particular quiz. So let's try this. Let's say we have here the basic calculation equals, then we have here score of the student, score of Abby for quiz number 1, divided by the number of items up here, so that's 10, and then times 100, just like what you can see on the formula over here. And the answer will be, of course, 10%, because 1 is 10% of 10 total points. So that is your percentage over here. Now, if you want to copy this one cell down, look at what happened. So I'm gonna Control C over here, and I'm gonna paste the formula in this cell. Ooh, what happened? You have here a percentage of 200%. We are expecting 20% because 2 is 20% of 10, right? We are supposed to be expecting 20%, but what happened? Why is this 200%? Because once again, when we copy pasted one cell down, the reference of B3 and B2 have both moved one cell down. So what happened is this. What happened is B3 divided by B2 turned into, if you look at the formula bar, it now says B4 divided by B3. So what happens is, what you're actually doing is 2, which is in B4, divided by 1, which is in B3, times 100. So 2 divided by 1, that's 2, times 100, that's 200. So that is why your answer is 200. Now, if we try copy pasting this to the right, so say for example, we copy this formula and paste it here, you will notice that it still works because you see here, D3, which is 1, divided by D2, which is 20, times 100, which is correct. That gives you an amount of 5%. However, when you start moving downwards, so copy this and paste this here, you will get again an answer of 200%, because once again, not only has the formula adjusted two spaces to the right, it also adjusts one space down. So that is why the references say already D4, which is 2, divided by D3, which is 1, 2 divided by 1, that's 2, times 100, that's again 200%. So if you copy to the right, if you copy horizontally, you seem to get the correct answer. But if you copy vertically, you have wrong answers now. So let's go back to the original formula. Let's remove all of this and let's focus on the formula that we put on cell C3 for now. So if you look at the formula, which is B3 divided by B2, look at what you want to happen here. You want to have cell B3, you want to make the reference cell B3 adjust depending on where you put the formula after copy pasting. As far as the cell B2 is concerned, you want Microsoft Excel to keep on adjusting the column part, which is the B part. Because when you copy paste to the right, you want Microsoft Excel to keep on adjusting the column, the columns as well. But you want the row, all right? You want the row to remain the same. You don't want to adjust the row. In other words, you want to keep on pointing to the reference of the second row. And why? That is because the total scores are here on row 2. So again, you on cell B2, or the reference B2, you want the column to remain adjusting to where you copy and paste, but you want the row to remain the same. So let's try this page over here on this sheet. Now, if you were here with us when we were talking about the rand function, remember during the lesson on the rand function, there was a part there wherein we were trying to create a random number between two numbers. Now, in that particular situation, we were only generating one grade for every student. So what if we want to generate not just one grade, but in this case, we want to generate 8 different grades for one student. And then we want to generate that random grade between two numbers. How would that work? So as a review of what we did during the previous lesson, it went like this. So equals quantity, and then we put in the rand function, close open close parenthesis like so, and then multiplied by the quantity of the maximum grade minus the minimum grade. That is where we want to create our random number. So maximum grade minus the minimum grade, like so, plus the minimum grade, like so. And then what we get is 90.7454. That is our randomly generated grade between 95 and 90. So that we don't have to keep on repeating the exact same formula again and again, what we want to do is we want to copy paste this to the right. So let's try this. Every time we paste this, we generate another random number. If you remember, that's how the random function works. So we paste it here, then we paste it here, we paste it here, and over here, over here, over here. So is this correct? Not necessarily. You will notice that as you move the formulas to the right, you seem to be getting the exact same numbers. They all stick to 90. Why is that so? Isn't this supposed to be maximum grade of 95 and minimum grade of 90? Why are they all generating random numbers at around 90? That is because the formula, the references, are turning up incorrect. Now, why is it incorrect? Pay attention to the formula. So, for our first grade, the Filipino grade, in this column over here, you will notice that if you look at the formula, it is still pointing to B2 minus C2, which is where we put the maximum grade and the minimum grade. So, all is fine and dandy. However, if we look at, the formulas have changed already. If we look at the English formula over here, because you copy-pasted the formula one cell to the right, the references have also moved one cell to the right. So, the references are not pointing to the maximum grade and minimum grade anymore. So, it says there C2 minus D2. This was originally B2 minus C2, but it is now C2 minus D2 again because you moved the cell reference one cell to the right. And so, therefore, it is not pointing to, the reference is not pointing to the maximum grade and minimum grade. It is already pointing to the minimum grade and the Filipino grade. So that is why you will see here, the grades are now starting to become homogeneous. Or in other words, the grades are already sticking to one particular part of the bracket. That is because the references are already incorrect because of the copy-pasting. So you will notice that for as long as we are still in the Filipino column, for example, let's copy that and paste that here. So you will see here B3 minus C3 on the formula bar, B3 minus C3 plus C3. So you're pointing to these cells over here. That is still correct. If we move one cell down, for as long as you're still in the Filipino column, B4 minus C4 on the formula bar, so you are still pointing to the correct cells. So in other words, if you keep on copy-pasting downwards, you are still getting exactly what you want. However, once you start copy-pasting to the right, you are no longer getting the correct formulas. Again, because the formula, or rather the references, are already adjusting rightwards, which is not what you want. So if you remember a while ago on the previous sheet, what we were saying was, we want the cell references of the columns to be adjustable, but we want the row to remain constant. We want the row to remain stable. That is a different case with this particular example. In this particular example, we want the rows to become adjustable, but we want the columns to remain constant when we copy paste. Now, in the face of a problem like this, most basic or beginner users actually do not know what to do and just resort to having to manually input each and every formula so that it points to the reference that they want. So you have here, for example, you have here 8 grades, and then you have here 40 students. So they find themselves manually inputting 8 times 40, that's 320 cells with 320 formulas so that they get what they want. Or in this case, most basic or beginner users will end up having to, or will end up resorting to, manually typing each and every formula so that it points to the correct score and the correct number of items. So because this is made up of 5 quizzes times 40 students, they will end up having to type like 200 different formulas. So how do you solve these problems then? Well, these problems are actually very, very easily solved if you know how to properly use the two very broad types of references. And these broad types of references are what we know as relative references and absolute references. Now, what is a relative reference? A relative reference, just like what you can see on the screen, a relative reference is a cell reference that will move or adjust when copy-pasting based on the source and destination of the copy-pasting. Of course, it does not affect cut and pasting. And so far, what we've been using in all of our lessons are all relative references. An absolute reference, on the other hand, is a cell reference that will not move or adjust when copy-pasting based on the source and destination of the copy-pasting. It is still not affected, or it does not affect, rather, cut and pasting. In formulas, what exactly do relative references and absolute references look like? So, you have here on the screen different references all pointing to cell A1. When a reference is pointing to cell A1, it just says there A1. This is what we know as a relative reference. If you copy-paste A1 and if you copy-paste the cell reference A1, paste it somewhere else, this will change based on where you pasted it. On the other hand, what we have here on the second row is what we know as an absolute reference. It is still actually pointing to cell A1, but you have here $A$1. The dollar sign is a signal to Microsoft Excel that the column, which is A, and the row, which is 1, should not be changed when this is copy-pasted. So this is what we know as an absolute reference. So this reference will keep on pointing to cell A1 no matter where you copy and paste this. If you want just the column to stick, but the row to adjust, you have here what we know as an absolute column reference. And that is because only the column part, which is A, has the dollar sign. So what happens in this case is, if you copy-paste this somewhere else, only the column will adjust, only the row will adjust rather, not the column. And lastly, you have here the absolute row reference because only the row has the dollar sign. So only the row is absolute. So in other words, if you copy-paste this cell reference, only the column will change, but not the row. Well, the best way to teach you is to show you, so let's try this. Now, going back to this example, once again, we want all of these performance task grades to be added to the group grade to get the final performance task grade. So what we want is, each and every grade over here, we want to add by 10 so that we get the final grade here. Now, once again, if you look at the formula, this will be characterized by cell B3, which is the individual grade here, plus the group grade over here, which is the same for all of the students. So what we want here is, we want cell B3 to remain relative because we want cell B3 to keep on adjusting based on where we copy-paste data. But we want cell L2 to be absolute. We want cell L2 to stick no matter where we copy-paste the data. So how do we turn cell L2? If you look at the reference here, how do we turn the L2 reference into an absolute reference? There are two simple ways. First way is to just manually type in the dollar sign. So you will find, of course, a dollar sign on your keyboard. It is the symbol right above the number 4 on your keyboard. So let's type here $L, $2. So that is a way to tell Microsoft Excel that if you copy paste if you copy paste this formula somewhere else, do not change L because it has a dollar sign, and do not change 2 because it has a dollar sign. The other way of doing this is to do the following. So on the formula bar, you click on the reference that you want to turn into an absolute reference, and then on your keyboard, press F4. Okay? So when you press F4, you will notice that Microsoft Excel has now changed L2 into $L2. In fact, if you keep on pressing F4 like so, you will actually cycle through the different kinds of absolute references. So you have here relative reference, press F4 once, you have absolute reference. Press it again, you have here absolute row reference because the row has the dollar sign. Press it again, you have the absolute column reference because it is L that now has a dollar sign. So in this case, we want an absolute reference because we want L2 to remain the same no matter where we copy paste this. So let's press it once, and then you have B3 plus $L2 and press enter. So let's copy paste this now. So you will see here, if I copy here, Control C and then Control V somewhere else, you will now notice that from B3, all right, cell B3 plus cell L2 with the absolute reference markers, the dollar signs. So B3 plus L2. Now, if you look at the formula that we put here right beside it, you have here C3 plus L2. Even though we copied it one cell to the right, because it is an absolute reference, Microsoft Excel keeps it at L2. That is how the absolute reference works. So much so that we can actually Control C this now and then copy it all the way here. And now we're done with our work. We have now successfully calculated, or rather combined, individual grades with group grades. So some of you may probably be thinking, do I really need to learn absolute references in this case? Why don't I just mentally add 10 to each and every score here whenever I'm typing them or when I was recording them on my class record? So that this already appears as 11, this already appears at 20, as 20. It's much easier that way. We don't have to learn all of that absolute reference stuff. But what's beautiful about this absolute reference, my dear viewers, is this. Because this is now an absolute reference, if you change the group grade in cell L2, like for example, from 10 points, you want to give them 9 points a group grade, you will see here that all of the cells have now changed. You want to give them a group grade of 8 points. These all will change instantly without you having to recalculate it, because again, all of these are pointing to cell L2 when you're adding them. Or you want to give them a group grade of 20, like so. That is the beauty of using an absolute reference. It makes work so much easier, so much faster. So in this particular class record, as a review of what we talked about a while ago, we want the columns to adjust based on where we copy paste the formula, but we want the row to remain constant. In other words, what we want here is an absolute row reference. So in other words, in this formula, if you look at the formula bar, B3 divided by B2 times 100. B2 is where the number of items is, and in the number of items, we want the row to remain constant. So let's put here a dollar sign beside the row so that the row now becomes an absolute reference, and then press enter. So now let's copy paste this. Let's copy that and then paste that, say for example here. So you will notice, my dear viewers, that from B3 divided by B2 times 100, if you look at the formula bar, but if you look at where we pasted that here, B8 divided by B2. In other words, B8, because it is a relative reference, it has adjusted to the copy-paste. Divided by B2 here, because again, it's stuck there because it is an absolute row reference. So 2 remains constant. So that is why it's still pointing to the correct cell. So you have here 6 divided by 10 over here times 100. That is why you get 60. In fact, if you copy here and paste that way over there, you'll still have the correct answer, which is 6 divided by 50 times 100 is equal to 12%. Why? Because it has now adjusted J8. It is now pointing to the correct cell, and this is pointing the correct cell J2 over here. Why again? Because the column has adjusted, because column is not absolute, J, but the row is still absolute because again, we put a dollar sign. So that is why the row is still pointing to the correct place and the column is pointing to the correct place where we want it, which is J. So that is absolute row reference. In fact, what we can do now is we can now copy that, paste all of that there, and paste all of that here, and we now have the correct calculations for the percentage grades of these quizzes very, very quickly by knowing how to use the absolute row reference. And finally, in this example, if you remember, we want the column to remain the same, to remain stable, but we want the rows to be adjustable when we copy paste this. So in other words, what we need here is an absolute column reference. So in other words, when we take this formula, B2 minus C2 plus C2, so we want to put a dollar sign right next to the columns like so. So we want here $B, $C, $C. That is because we want the absolute column references. We want these references to keep on pointing to column B and column C no matter where we paste that. So we press enter. That is now what the random numbers look like. And in fact, because these are now the way that we put the absolute reference is now correct, instead of having to rewrite the same random formula for all of these cells, we can just take this formula and then copy it all the way here. Whoops. Copy it all the way here. And when we paste that, we're essentially done. You now have correct random grades based on your specifications written on this column, simply because you know how to use properly absolute column references. Please note, my dearest viewers, that even though we put absolute references on these formulas here, they will still follow the regular rules of cut and pasting, just like what we've already discussed in the previous lesson on cutting, copying, and pasting. If you remember, please search this channel. You will find it actually in the descriptions below, the previous episode on cutting, copying, and pasting. So once again, even though these absolute references will affect copying and pasting, they do not affect the regular rules of cutting and pasting. So let's do a little bit of demonstration. So you'll see here that all of these cells are pointing to, to the cell pertaining to the performance task, and they're all pointing to cell L2. If I take all of these cells here and then I cut them to somewhere else, say for example, I put them here, you will notice that the results have not changed because the cells have not been affected by the cutting and pasting as per the rules of cutting and pasting. And in fact, if I take cell L2, remember all of these cells are pointing to cell L2. If I cut this and paste this somewhere else like this, you will notice that that's okay because all of these cells are now pointing, absolute reference by the way, are now pointing to cell H3 because that is where you placed cell L2. That is, as we've discussed before, those are the regular rules of cutting and pasting. So once again, absolute references only affect copying and pasting, but they do not affect the regular rules of cutting and pasting. And here's a nice tip for you. If in case you didn't know, absolute references do in fact work for ranges. If you remember, during our previous lesson, we were talking about ranges. If you haven't watched that, you will see the link to the previous lesson on the description for this video. If you remember ranges refer to two references. You have the upper left corner and the lower right corner. You have the space in between. That is your range. Absolute reference works for both of those references or only one of those references. So to demonstrate the absolute reference working for both the upper left and the lower right corner, say for example, we're going to use a sum function here, sum of B2 over here all the way down to F41 over here. So that is your range from B2 to F41. You can actually turn this into an absolute reference here and another absolute reference here, and you have this because it's all blank. So you will notice $B2 to $F41. So if you copy this and then paste that downwards, you will notice, of course, that all of them say $B2 to $F41. So yes, absolute references also work for ranges. The reason I am telling you this beforehand is later on we're going to work with ranges a lot, and we're going to have to put absolute references on them. When we start working with VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, when we start working with COUNTIF or index, we're going to need ranges that have absolute references on them. So that is why I am telling you this in advance. And by the way, yes, in this channel, we are in the future going to talk about things like the COUNTIF function, the VLOOKUP, the HLOOKUP, and then of course the index functions. If you want to learn all of those, please subscribe to this channel so that you won't miss those lessons when they come. But of course, just like what I mentioned a while ago, you may use absolute references not only on both parts of the range, but also on just one of the references of the range, just like what I will demonstrate to you right now. So let's have this situation. Say for example, you are the person in charge for the grade 7 level of your school. And for this school, you are, for this situation, you are gathering donations for, let's say, a Christmas outreach program in your school. So let's say, for example, you are starting your Christmas outreach gathering of donations as early as July. So you have here your various classes, 7A, grade 7 section A, you have 7B, 7C, 7D, and 7E. So say for example, you have, somebody in 7A donated 10 pesos on July 1. Then somebody in 7C donated 30 pesos on July 1. And then, for example, on July 3, you have somebody donating 50 pesos from 7B, then another 10 pesos from 7C, another 40 pesos from 7D, and then 5 pesos from 7E. So let's say, for example, what you want to create here is a running balance. And when I say running balance, it's kind of like saying how much is the total donations so far. So to create the running balance or the amount of donations so far as calculations are concerned, this is how it looks like. So you have here, on July 1, the running balance is the sum of these cells over here. Now, as of July 2, the running balance is the sum of not just July 2, but rather the sum of July 1 and July 2. So in other words, you're asking how much are the donations, total donations, as of July 2. So as far as July 3 is concerned, over here, July 3 is the sum of all 3 of these rows. And then for July 4, the sum is all 4 of these rows. Now, this is a lot of rows. You have here 40 rows. So you don't really have to keep on doing the sum function and then highlighting all of the ranges again and again 40 times, for as long as you know how to use absolute referencing. So let's start from the very top. So let's delete all of that and then let's stick to here. So what we want to do is, in this range, which is B2 to F2, we already know that if we copy this and paste this downwards, both B2 and F2 are going to adjust downwards as well. However, what we want to happen is we want B2 to remain constant. We want cell B2 to keep on pointing to this upper leftmost corner here, and we want F2 to adjust downwards so that the more we copy paste downwards, the bigger the range becomes. So that is what we're gonna do. We're going to put an absolute reference on cell B2 and F2 remains as a relative reference. Again, what we're doing here is we have a range wherein only one of the references in the range has an absolute reference. So now you will see the formula here. We have here sum of $B $2, the absolute reference to F2. So let's copy that and let's paste that all the way down there. So if you look at the first row, again, that's $B $2 to F2. If you look at the second row, you now have this range, the range of 2 rows. That's because, again, $B $2 is an absolute reference. It's not changed, but F3 has now adjusted downwards, thus making the range 2 rows worth. If you look at the next formula, the range is now 3 rows worth. And the fourth formula, you now have a range of 4 rows worth. By the time you get to the last formula, you now have the range of all of these cells from here, from B2 all the way to F41 here. So that is because, once again, only the left part is an absolute reference, but the right part is a relative reference. So you have here a range of increasing increasing size. So to test that, let's put here donations by 7A of 15 pesos. So you have here, all of that has already changed. So you have here 160 pesos as of July 6. Then let's say, for example, somebody very generous donated 1,000 pesos from 7C. And you have here everything adjusting. Somebody donated 5,000 pesos in 7E, and then somebody donated 3 pesos. Every bit counts when it comes to donations. So you have here all of these adjusting. So my dearest viewers, now I hope I've showed to you properly the proper use of absolute references, and I really do hope that after watching this video, you open your laptop and then you practice the use of absolute references. Not just, absolute references, but also absolute column references and absolute row references. I hope I was able to demonstrate to you how powerful the knowledge of absolute references is and how quickly and easily you can finish your work if you know how to properly use absolute references. So that's it for our lesson on absolute references. Once again, I am Carlo, and this is Carlo Excels. Thank you very much for watching.